What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleashed, the weekly panel discussion show. And as always, we got a fantastic panel. So let's go ahead and introduce today's special guest. You've seen him before on this channel. You've seen him on the Slip and Dip podcast. You have read and watched his work on Flow Combat, Fan-Sided MMA. My good friend, happy to see you back. Matt Wells, what's going on?
What's up, man? Always glad to be here amongst, turbulent times throughout the world. Hey, I'm glad you guys invited me back on, especially this week, to break down all the madness that's been going on inside and outside of the MMA world. So
wait, something weird's been happening?
I'm ready.
something strong out there?
Couple things.
Yeah, a couple fights happened. That's
couple things.
Yeah,
I didn't say they were in the cage, but there are fights going on right now.
Right.
So let's go ahead and introduce someone on this panel. As always, he is the jack of all trades who has mastered them all, the senior editor of SureDog.com, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, what's going on, brother?
I'm doing well, all things considered. Just hoping that my friends and family out there are safe as can be right now. That's about it.
Definitely. And of course, the man who has all the statistics, all the numbers, all the figures. He is the associate editor of SureDog.com. He is Jay Petrie. Jay, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm grateful that we had fights this weekend for just a 6-hour window of shut off your brain, watch two people punch each other, and then get back to all the other pressing matters at hand because, oh my God. So stat of the week this week, ladies and gentlemen, 4. The last 2 fights for Tyron Woodley, he has given up 4 takedowns. Now, in his 21-fight career in Strikeforce and UFC, leading up to losing this title to Usman, he gave up 3. And in his last 2 fights, he's given up 4. So, Tyron Woodley, he's going through some stuff right now.
Yeah, man, definitely a different result than I expected, at least for the main event at the UFC's first Quarantine Apex Center event. But before we get into that, the biggest news in the MMA world has to be the arguably the greatest fighter of all time. According to Dana White, he's the GOAT. However, he is now in a back and forth with Dana White, half of it on Twitter, half of it through press conferences. But the culmination into Jones apparently relinquishing his title in favor of vigilante work on the streets of Albuquerque. That's another story. We'll get into that. But anyway, do you guys think this belt is really vacant? And I mean, who's going to flinch first in what seems to be a promotional game of chicken? Matt, I'm going to start with you, my man.
I'm just dumbfounded that we're even at this point right now with John Jones. Like, it seemed like we've been down this road recently with Demetrius Johnson, like dominant champion. For whatever reason, him and the promotion, like they couldn't figure it out, right? And with this one, it seems like it's just a money issue with John Jones, apparently. And he's a guy that deserves every penny possible, considering not only his performances in the cage, but he's also a draw. I think like the 3rd biggest draw for the UFC right now.
Yeah.
I think is that accurate?
Yeah.
So he's very valuable to the brand. And it's just mind blowing that time and time again, we with these high profile guys, they keep butting heads with the UFC brass. They're like, I need to get paid more. I need to be compensated properly. But at the same time, we never see like a main union effort like that sticks, I mean, that's a very layered issue, but at the same time, when you have the repeated issue of pay, why can't that ever come together? I don't know, but it's just extremely mind blowing that John Jones of all people is now out here on these Twitter streets saying Vina Vina Vici to my belt. Like, what?
Man, absolutely nuts. And I think one thing that's a very interesting wrinkle about this whole ordeal, and I've referenced this on this show before. Matt Hunter of Mixed Combat Radio, good friend of our show and our program, he has been shouting this from a mountaintop for as long as I've known him. The pay-per-view buy rates compared to boxing and MMA, when you see a lot of these big stars, they don't sell in boxing. They don't sell as much as UFC pay-per-views in a lot of cases. John Jones is someone who has regularly outsold Deontay Wilder, who has had guaranteed paydays to up to $30 million. So to reference Deontay Wilder and John Jones together and try to make a comparison as Dana White did about the business not generating as much money. I mean, come on now. Are we having a conversation about what the UFC actually generates? Are we having a conversation about what the UFC is actually willing to give up to its talent? So Jay, please tell me where it is, at least from a statistical standpoint. Can you tell us where John Jones ranks alongside some boxing heavyweights here?
I mean, with boxing heavyweights, it's weird to think that the boxing model, and I know that there's people that have much better numbers than I. There's a chasm between the Mayweathers and then the Pacquiaos that can draw $1 million and change, and then there's the others that drop down. Now that is kind of similar to the UFC situation where there are a couple top guys. Conor McGregor will draw $1 million pies kicking Cowboy in the head for 40 seconds. But when it comes to the revenue dispersal from the outlets and from the pay-per-view people giving the money to the fighters, the UFC gives far, far less. And Dana has that purse lock and key. It's the kind of thing where when Jones says that, I kind of got that feeling. I mean, this is all on Twitter, so it could mean nothing, and everything could be resolved by a phone call. One quick, hey, okay, let's get this situated. We gotta stop this. That Dana's the kind of guy that will say, all right, I'm taking your belt. All right, we're out of here. We up out of here, and we're going to move on to the next thing. Now, Eric McGracken, I don't actually have heard his name said, laid out a great line through what Dana's going through. So first of all, the MMA is bigger than boxing. That's Dana's, what he said, and that's what he's sticking to it. Okay. So if we assume that, all right. Second, John Jones is the greatest MMA fighter of all time. Dana said it just the other day. Third of all, and Dana has said this and expressed this when it comes to not having to follow rules and say, I'm the boss, I run this show, is that Dana is the top promoter in MMA. Lastly, John Jones is crazy if he thinks he can make what top boxers make. So how is it that Jones is the best, MMA is bigger than boxing, Dana's the boss of the bosses, and yet Jones can't make the money that boxers make, even though MMA is superior? It logically is inconsistent, but it kind of fits in the UFC's model. But the UFC is losing some talents. They're losing some names. They're losing some great fighters recently. I mean, Henry Cejudo, that's been, a week where he bailed, explicitly saying if the UFC paid me better, I'd stick around. This might be a soul-searching moment for the UFC because this is going to hurt the UFC much more than it's going to hurt John Jones.
All right, so Ben, now we're at this weird standstill here. Do you think Jones is actually giving up this belt, and are we going to see, I guess, continued aggressions between the two on social media, press conferences, or whatever the vehicle may be?
I think they'll probably continue to kind of stare each other down for the next little while because, he doesn't have to book his next title defense right away. They can stand and stare each other down for a couple more months yet. I'm generally going to be in favor of anything that increases fighter pay, from the top level stars all the way down to the entry level fighters that have just been called up. I mean, we've discovered within the last year that fighter pay is about 15% of the UFC's revenue. I mean, obviously that puts it far, far below boxing. It puts it far below all the major stick and ball sports. I mean, I think hockey is the lowest among the major league team sports, and it still comes in a little under 50%, I think. So the UFC could triple its pay from the top down and still come in under 50% of their revenue. And all of a sudden, I mean, if we're learning that, okay, reading between the lines, Jones probably makes between $5 and $7 million a fight. If you triple that, now he's making close to that 20 million that he was kind of talking about. all of a sudden people entering at the entry level are making enough money that they can train full time if they fight, say 3 times a year. That's all I want out of this, is to see the best fighters fight each other and as well prepared as possible. And I'd like to see the sport be able to retain its most talented fighters and its biggest stars. That's all I want out of this. And hopefully Jones is kind of willing to dig his heels in on this, because he's one of very, very few fighters with the clout to possibly make the UFC blink.
I think it's very interesting too, Ben. You mentioned fighters, having to, make enough money so that they can train full time on this very card, as this card that the media obligations for Dana White centered around him saying whatever he wanted about Jones, and not being able to pay him the amount that he claims that Jones wanted. I mean, Brandon Royval had a incredible performance on Saturday night, and spent his entire post-fight speech saying, "Oh my God, I can't stand the fact that I have to go to work tomorrow."
He was in tears.
Yeah, see, I wonder. I think he works with like at-risk youth or something in the correction system, something to that effect. Man, I can't really say he hates his job, but I mean, damn, you just had a fight of the night style performance. I think they end up winning fight of the night, right? Yeah. So you just win fight of the night in a major UFC card, and you got to go clock in tomorrow. Does that sound right?
Man, it's like the end of 8 Mile. Like Eminem beats the 3 dudes from
Falcon and that
Papa Doc, beats Falcon and all 3 of those dudes in a row, wins the one night tournament, and then he's going to go back to work at the steel mill the next day.
I mean, he did say, and this is I got a kick out of this. Royal did say, "Yeah, I called in sick tomorrow. I called in sick after all." So at least there's that. But yeah, I mean, that I was picking up on what Duffy was saying, is that there's 2 arguments here. There's the the top guys should be making top money. Like Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, what are they? I mean, that's a mega heavyweight fight. And for what? 300,000 buys? So it's a very unusual thing for somebody like John Jones to come in there and fight Dominic Reyes and hit what I think it was like 750. And then on the other side, there's guys that make 10, 10, 12, 12 that have to hope and pray that they get bonus money so that they can kind of take a little time off to finally start training full time. Because if Royval hadn't got that money, he'd be right in there tomorrow, or right in there today, actually.
Yeah, man, I'm tuned in to this whole back and forth here, but I'm just wondering now. Jones has actually said that he has other avenues to revenue. I mean, he did put an open call out to terminate his contract, other promoters to bid for his services and whatnot. Acting, he kind of laid it all out there, but I'll just leave this with you, Matt. Now, does John Jones have a career as far as paid for vigilantism?
I mean, I would imagine so, right? That's what we're seeing going on Twitter, right? He's out there yanking spray cans out of people's hands left and right, protecting the city. Like the Dark Knight has returned, man.
Does the Phoenix Jones costume come in a XXL?
Dude, I was getting there. I was just getting there.
I said this on Twitter earlier today. I think John Jones is Phoenix Jones in reverse.
Exactly.
Like they have the exact reverse arc now. Like in 2020, we have seen MMA superhero Phoenix Jones now become a criminal. We've also seen MMA's criminal John Jones now become a superhero. I don't know what's going on here. This is bizarre world.
So can we say that John Jones is having a rebirth? So he's rising from the ashes.
Is this new 52 John Jones?
Is this new Phoenix Jones?
It's the dark Phoenix Jones arc.
Arc. I like it. I'm sold.
It'll be declared non-canon 10 years from now because it was so bad.
But there's an actual point to this, though, that this week that we've seen out of John Jones in film terms is more character development and kind of narrative moving than a lot of what he's done before. Because not only is he standing up for himself finally and saying, here's the deal, man. This is what you said. This is what I said. Hook me up to a lie detector. Publish the tweets. Of course, it's a lot of posturing and chest puffery, but I'm fighting for us. I'm fighting for pay. And he's also doing some good in the community. And not only did he take the spray cans and say, hey, you kids, but also I saw tweets of him today, videos of him hauling in lumber, helping to rebuild stuff in Albuquerque. So, yeah, I mean, what chance is this? Is fourth or fifth revision John Jones the guy? Like how Andre Arlovski keeps on having these rebirths? Is that John Jones 5.0?
Dude, I always think back to press conferences that they do, one of those big, seasonal press conferences way back when they let fans ask the question, and the one guy got on the mic and was like, John, it's so damn hard to be your fan, essentially was his quote. And of course, everybody laughed, yada, yada. Right now, it's so damn hard not to be a John Jones fan.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how you can witness everything that he's been doing and saying on Twitter, from the fighter pay issue, from him, wanting to relinquish his belt because he's not being appreciated properly in terms of compensation, to all the things he said about the protests going on, and of course the murder of George Floyd, to going out in his community and playing good guy, without the cape, essentially. I don't know how you're not a fan of John Jones right now. And yes, of course, there's always going to be those haters because of all of his past transgressions. But you can't say that John is not trying. He's trying. He's got his demons, but the guy is trying his best from what we can see.
I'll echo that right away. I mean, we on this show have been very critical of his behavior. I know I personally have been very critical of his behavior on a myriad of podcasts and articles, and pretty much you can, look at my track record and find that. But let's compliment the man when he's doing something right here. I mean, not only has he been championing a cause for fighters, and really thumbing his nose at the establishment in that sense, in the interest of fighter pay, and trying to force Dana to show them receipts. Like I need to see these receipts. I need to see this. You know what I'm saying? But
Dude, real quick on that. Yeah. Did you pick up on the post-fight press conference when Oscar asked him about that?
It was like 45 seconds.
He asked him directly about the tweets, showing the text messages, and Dana completely ignored the whole text message part of that question.
It was just like when he was asked about the New York Times article to spew your dislike of someone without actually answering the question. Well, we still don't know the answer. We still don't know. So when it comes to issues about fighter pay, it's so difficult to side with a promoter who we have on record on legal documents stating that the company takes 85% or so of the revenue, and the company has cut out the sponsorships. The company has cut out the fighters from benefiting at all from the broadcast deals. So it's very, very, very difficult to sit here and point a finger at John Jones when you look at the track record that Dana White and the UFC has as far as treating its fighters with the level of I don't even want to use the word respect. I think that's it's not focused enough on the money, but not paying them decently, at least paying them in a way that seems fair, as we've seen in other sports leagues where they benefit from so much. We just saw this announced last week. EA Sports and the NFL renewed their deal for the Madden games for $1.5 billion. Now, $1 billion is going to the NFL, and $500 million is going to the players. I asked this question on Twitter, and I got a whole lot of funny responses, and that's kind of what I expected. But all those funny responses hammered in the point. When I asked, how much do you think the fighters are getting paid from the upcoming EA Sports UFC game? Just think about that. Think about that. Think about also too the way that game is structured with a lot of the microtransactions as far as the online play. Who gets a share of that? I don't think the fighters are going to see too much of that. So
well, remember John Fitch. One of the big issues of John Fitch is that they were not paying him for his likeness rights in one of the UFC video games. I remember he was released for about, I don't know, wasn't it 2 weeks?
That was actually all of AKA.
Every AKA fighter
was
was
released okay, that's what I thought. I thought it stretched out beyond that. Yeah, it was a very narrow, pointed argument.
The entire welterweight top 10 was like gone.
And then the only other thing we've ever heard about pay with the video games is that Dana offered Clay Guida $10,000 to shave his hair so they didn't have to animate it for the character model.
And he said no. Yeah,
he said no.
Yeah, but then also too, there's a reason why Randy Couture has never been in a UFC game. Randy Couture is also one of the fighters that butted heads with Dana very publicly about pay, about the structure of his contract, and now isn't even allowed to enter the building during a UFC event, despite being a Hall of Famer and despite being one of the greatest fighters attached to the sport. So just think about it. And also, let's point out, too, some of those dummies out there. You know, I love to point out a dummy on this show. I've seen a fair amount of dummies out there that seem to think that this is some sort of complex way for John Jones to duck Dominic Reyes.
What?
Yes. People are that stupid.
Oh, yeah, I guess they are.
People are really that stupid. So, all right, fellas, now, unfortunately, we've got to take a turn for the more serious now. And, you know, obviously, it would be irresponsible for us to do a program and not address this and not talk about what's actually going on in real lives outside of sports. But this time, I guess the UFC kind of paved the way for that transition. So I was very surprised during the broadcast to see the image of RIP George Floyd posted on the screen at I think it was at the start of the main card broadcast, if I'm not mistaken, right? Alongside the picture of a longtime ringside physician for Nevada. But that RIP image, George Floyd, I don't know, made me feel a little different. And I'm going to let you guys go ahead, speak your piece, just in case I take too long speaking mine. Jay, I guess I'll start with you, man. What did you feel when you saw that image pop up on the screen?
Well, like I started off by talking at the very beginning of the intro when I said we have that little window where you can switch your brain off, because I run play-by-play for Sherdog.com, and it's a mad dash, fight to fight, round to round, fast as you can, go, 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 thousands of words. So it's a very busy, specific task. So I was able to not think about any of everything going on, family members that are at protests, et cetera, and that image flashed, and I just stopped for a second. Ooh, it wasn't the worlds colliding, but it was that moment of, okay, maybe you can't actually escape it after. Now, I know we are probably going to get stick to sports people talking, that are upset, but we can't ignore it. Sports is the escape that we need when life sucks. Some states have specifically carved out exemptions to allow sports to go down in a pandemic. There are 100,000 people dead in the U.S., and many states are saying, it doesn't matter, we don't care, we have to have these sports to do it. So that tells you something, that it has to happen, it has to be part of our lives. But then to go ahead and assume that sports and politics and race relations and whatnot aren't intertwined and involved is ludicrous. And you can think of the people that, I'm sure Ant may have clapped a few people back here and there. I'm guessing. I don't know. That are just absurd about how dare we broach the subject. But companies all over the world are speaking out about this. And there's actually kind of a blueprint to them now. There's a black background, the white text, the company logo, we have the statement, we're going to say something, we support you and everything. ESPN today put out a little picture snapshot thingy, whatever you want to call it, a statement. It wasn't really a statement, but kind of a statement. Quote, ESPN stands on the side of diversity, inclusion, and equity for all. We are one team, ESPN. That was everything. What the hell does that mean? What does it accomplish? What can you do with it? It's the kind of thing where you say, well, we had to say something. It's such a complex situation. And for that moment, I was brought back to reality, and I'm glad they did. I'm glad the UFC put something out there. It was important to see, to feel, even if Dana White, whatever he says and personally feels and however the UFC implements it, okay, fine. Something was said and it was observed, and I guess that's probably all we can get from them. We had to leave the rest up to the fighters like Israel Adesanya and John Jones to come up and deal with people that go like this in pictures because, cool. Yeah. So how did I feel about it? Yeah, I felt a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I feel it because I definitely wanted your perspective on that, Jay, because I know you were working play by play, and I remember us interacting a little bit on Twitter on that, and clearly the mood changed.
It did 100%.
When you saw that, and
it was that kind of that click, the switch flipped of the go, okay, fights, relief. I mean, because I had spoken to some other colleagues and said, God, I'm so glad that there are fights happening. I said this at the beginning of the broadcast. I'm so glad we have that moment and we can work, we can put that together, we can deal with this, we can be together in our community and then deal with the horrible things that happen. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe you guys have some other thoughts too. I'm curious. I'm really curious.
Well, I definitely do. But let's. So, Matt, I have a feeling we're on the same page on this one, thanks to our private conversations. So Ben, I haven't. I know you're kind of leaning in the same direction as I do, but I haven't talked to you about this outside of our personal conversation, outside of our show formats. But so Ben, tell me what entered your mind when you saw that hit the screen.
Well, the first thing I want to get out of the way is that there is no stick to sports anymore. Sports and politics have mutually chosen to intertwine and become the same thing. As soon as the UFC put out a professionally in-house created, like basically TV special about its long-standing relationship with the current president of the United States. And it wasn't just a history piece saying, oh, we used to be in his casinos. It was explicitly identifying themselves with his personality traits that they find admirable. And when the president of the UFC, spoke on his behalf at a convention, like they've chosen to intertwine. When the NFL accepts taxpayer money, my money, your money, to put on patriotic displays before games, as we found out, it was not just a goodwill thing on the part of the NFL. They were taking taxpayer money for it. There is no stick to sports anymore. It's all the same thing. So if you're saying stick to sports because you don't like the message you're hearing, then just fuck all the way off. With that out of the way, when the RIP George Floyd thing went up, I kind of braced and cringed. And it's an easy thing to say, as Jay said, very simple to put up just a nondescript, inoffensive banner or message. So I'll just give him the benefit of the doubt for the moment and say, that was a nice gesture. Thank you. I'm watching to see what you do next.
All right. Yeah, fair statement right there. So Matt, speak your piece, my man. What did you think the moment that hit the screen?
So to be honest, I didn't actually see it when it happened because it was the beginning of the main card. I went to go fill up my drink, came back and saw on Twitter that there was screenshots of what went down, and I was like, I just kind of stared at my Twitter screen for a second. I was like, really? Because I wasn't sure how to feel about it either. I was kind of conflicted because on one hand, for me personally, the entire night I was struggling to pay attention to the card because I'm sitting here. I've got TweetDeck pulled up, and I have a news tab and a politics tab, and those two tabs were just going crazy, right? With updated videos of everything going on at these protests across the United States. Horrific videos from not only people acting a damn fool, looting and stealing and doing all that stuff, but the police officers further overstepping their boundaries in terms of what they're supposed to be doing as officers of the law. So that was very frustrating throughout the entire night. And then, I was kind of trying to keep my eye on the fights to not only tweet about it, but also, again, like Jay was saying, have that escape from it, although I was not completely detached from it at all the entire night. It was more like, as soon as the card ended, as soon as Gilbert Burns got his hand raised, I was like, all right, closing all the UFC stuff, going back to catch up with everything. And my feelings about the UFC showing this is like, okay, it feels a little bit disingenuous because this is the first time they've done this, for someone that's not a celebrity, right? Why haven't you done it for any of the previous hashtags of people that have been slain at the hands of police officers? Are you going to continue to do this for every other person that gets slain at the hands of police officers, like, the ones that have already happened during these protests? I have so many questions. I don't know how to feel about it. I guess it's a good thing that they did at least acknowledge what's going on in the outside world. But so is every other corporation on this planet right now. And I think the main reason that so many corporations are doing that is because they have African-American employees that want to feel comfortable when they clock in at work. To say, hey, at least my employer kind of recognizes what's going on. Like when everybody was tripping out about the Target that got destroyed. Target CEO came out the next day. He's like, hey, we're good. Target's going to be all right. We're going to rebuild. Like, y'all just gave us a free, accelerated remodel to the store. It's hard to feel genuine concern from these big corporations when they say these things. Not to say that there isn't, genuine intent behind it, but it feels a little disingenuous when there's been so many other iterations of this in the past. And all of a sudden, this one is the one that's getting everybody's attention.
Yeah, fair statement right there. So I'll just go into, what the mood was like for me during all of Saturday. Now, Saturday was a very busy, chaotic day in the Walker household, as you probably can imagine by the background behind me. So we got, deliveries coming. I've got my son crying. I've got these fights on. I'm trying to write my MMA on point script. My wife is trying to do some stuff in the house, and it's bags of clothes being thrown around. I got to lift this. I got to make bottles. I'm all over the place, and I'm still trying to follow what's going on in the world. And by the world, I mean the greater Los Angeles area, as I know I have friends that went to protest, and following what's going on in DC, as my entire family is in that area. So I'm trying to follow all this going on, trying to watch these fights as some version of escape while I'm trying to write about some fights. I'm trying to take care of this kid, and it is pure chaos in this household. But when that popped up on the screen, I froze. I just straight up froze. And I know my first reaction, I tweeted out, I don't know what to feel right now, without really labeling what I was talking about. People who follow me and know me, they knew exactly where my mind was at that point. But and the more I think about it, I'll say first off, I'm glad that George Floyd is being honored in his unfortunate death. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that his name is going to live on. And he was a man who obviously did not deserve to die, and he died in a horrific, painful way. But do I really think this was a genuine gesture on the UFC's part, or was it a surface level pacifier to shut up a few black fans? That's kind of the first thought that pops in my head. Now, I know a lot of corporations are taking that route. A lot of corporations are putting out their statements, and we can track back to so many. And Target is one of those companies. Target is, their executive base is far right conservative, and has contributed to a lot of far right causes. So we can go down that rabbit hole. But I know this much. I know the UFC has done a lot of surface level bullshit. I know Dana White has dedicated his personal time and the UFC's time, money, and resources to boost up the same president that used his platform of the presidency to encourage police brutality. And no, I'm not talking about the statements that he just put out there about, exercising the Second Amendment rights of a bunch of G.I. Joe wannabe goofball motherfuckers that think they're going to shoot up innocent people that they think are this group that doesn't truly exist in Antifa or whatever. Not that. But I believe this was 2018 or 2017. Donald Trump spoke to a group of policemen where he joked and encouraged them to rough handle suspects. Sort of a green light to brutality. And look at his statements now about, cracking down on protesters and cracking down and the governors because yeah, exactly. So we're seeing, I do know this though. I do know when, as the presidential election starts revving back up and, the campaign trail start going as COVID-19 dips into the background and the civil unrest starts to quell down a little bit, Dana White's probably going to be speaking again for Trump. He's going to be speaking up again for Mike Pence, who put out his own disingenuous bullshit on Twitter this weekend. The same man who decided that it was a good use of taxpayer resources to walk into a football game to walk out, with the $250,000 it took in security costs for this fiasco to take place, all because players were kneeling.
How dare they kneel down? Oh my God.
And kneeling to acknowledge what?
Right.
Systemic racism and police brutality, the same thing that is causing this country to burn right now. So I have a very difficult time lending any real support to a message that is made to honor George Floyd. To me, this is no different than your favorite, conservative politician or your favorite just disconnect. I'm not even saying conservative because liberals be on that bullshit too. I'll say your favorite politician that isn't connected to anything from a true, genuine place of concern about their fellow man, just no matter their skin color, that's quoting Martin Luther King. Oof. That's what this is to me. This is the FBI tweeting out RIP Martin Luther King on MLK Day. That's what this sounds like to me. This has no surface. I mean, this has no root in anything below the surface of let's just appease a few black folks that might be watching. That's my take on this. So yeah, y'all know my Twitter handle. Yes, I want to smoke. So
for sure, man. And that's the thing, like, to just piggyback on that point that you were saying there at the end, you can look at previous examples of what's been going on that highlights the hypocrisy of this, right? Like, you can point to the NFL statement, for example. NFL put out that statement. Like, okay.
Oh,
yeah, like
the guy right over my shoulder here. Like, y'all, that dude's still blackballed from your league, but you care about the stuff that is going on that, you kick them out of the league for protesting. So just stuff like that doesn't make any sense. And then, like what Duffy was saying earlier about the Trump doc, like,
my God.
completely unprompted, unwarranted, unnecessary. And all of a sudden you're expecting us to believe that you're with the Black Lives Matter movement in a way. I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form. And then like you said, man, yeah, I would not be surprised whatsoever if Dana White shows up to the next RNC whenever they actually have that for Donald Trump's re-election campaign.
Will.
Yeah,
there's no doubt about it.
I mean, let's say to I want to say maybe a year ago, didn't the UFC put out like Pride Month shirts, and they're selling those on their website? Yeah,
I have one.
And this is as they're actually doing active business with Ramzan Kadyrov, as he is literally slaughtering gay people.
100%, man. 100%.
By the way, Ramzan Kadyrov, donkey of the day right there, is his dumbass been out there trying to kill people with COVID-19, and he's got COVID-19 himself. So fuck off, buddy.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to say on this is like we've seen so many examples of this hypocrisy, like not only through the corporate messages, but also the police themselves who are dealing with this stuff, because they're out there in some cities, they're out there walking hand in hand with the peaceful protesters, and then an hour later they're shooting pepper spray and rubber bullets in their face. Like, what do you like the messages right now, they're just so chaotic and all jumbled up. Like if you're in that position of authority right now, like you're very hard to be trusted that what you're saying is very genuine and what you're doing is very genuine, when you've repeatedly shown us that you're going to stab us in the back at some point in the near future or in the not so distant future.
Forget this.
Yeah.
To watch the press conference with like the Los Angeles area law enforcement today, and they're talking about, you know, respecting peaceful protest, and the LA County sheriff who has a documented history of letting police brutality slide and gangs within the department and everything, and this guy's talking about, oh, a peaceful protest, yeah, that works, and yeah. Okay, yeah, this is all labeled in the hypocrisy file for me.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean,
We sure didn't stick to sports today, huh?
I mean, the Chicago Blackhawks, with their very still controversial logo, put out a whole statement today about we do not support racism and offensive things. Like, straight up, like I can't make this kind of thing up. I'm not that smart. That they put a statement out denouncing racism with a very clearly racially motivated mascot, and it was literally it was the black and white text with the
logo right
and
there,
then the logo was on the statement denouncing racism. Yeah, it doesn't. It's the kind of. I mean, I think this is. I mean, I'm still sometimes behind the eight ball. I think this is corporate virtue signaling. This is we put out a statement, we support you, therefore you can't get mad at us because we didn't say something. This is we checked off the box, so now therefore you can't get mad when we do something stupid.
Man, and it's funny, like I definitely don't want us to go down this rabbit hole, because this will take forever in a day. But because all these corporations, we can trace back to all sorts of human rights violations, and you look at like Nike's track record of you know speaking up for racial tolerance and stuff, yet they operate sweatshops and stuff. So we can go down this rabbit hole, but it's safe to say that somebody in the comments is going to call us snowflakes. So let's go ahead.
Stick to sports then.
Yeah, we need to stick to sports. And in sticking to sports, we did have a main event that took place Saturday night. Tyron Woodley got absolutely dominated by Gilbert Burns. And now this is thrown, I think, a serious monkey wrench into the welterweight division. I know I was thinking that Tyron would come out victorious. I think that was the overall consensus on the panel. And Matt, I don't know where you stood on this one, but I think you were also in favor of Tyron, if I'm remembering correctly. That didn't quite happen. So now, with the former champion seemingly out of the title picture for the near future, we have a new contender in Gilbert Burns. Now, what does this title picture look like? Who is number one contender? Who should be next? We got Usman calling out McGregor. We got Masvidal calling out Diaz for another unnecessary fight. If I had a stack of papers, I'd throw them in the air. Total chaos, gentlemen. Please shed some light. Organize this chaos for me.
Burns put together the best win of his career at the perfect time. Because if you look at the rest of kind of that top 5 through 8, it's a bunch of dudes that, I mean, Usman has already fought and dominated a bunch of guys that there's not going to be any interest in seeing him fighting. Like, And Burns just kind of elbowed his way past some dudes towards the front of the line. We had the in the kind of Sherdog editorial group, we had our rankings debate / discussion after Saturday's card, and I was one of the people, probably the one leading the charge, for Burns to leapfrog past Masvidal in our welterweight top 10, just because, I mean, he has beaten Damian Maia and now Tyron Woodley very convincingly since the last time Masvidal even fought. And you go back to his last fight before that, he dominated Gunnar Nelson. I think those 3 fights are a lot more impressive than beating Diaz and Askren. So, and Burns realizes it too, because he was right away saying, yeah, Usman's my teammate, but I would fight him. This is what we trained to do. I wouldn't be mad to see Burns up next.
All right. Anybody else want to throw their name in the hat? Burns as the rightful number 1 contender now? I
think by Burns instantly in the little headset interview, which was, I'm so glad they did those, and I thought those were pretty good. I like those a little better for some reason with DC asking him questions. I just thought it flowed well. That Burns by saying, I want to fight Usman, I want to fight my teammate. I know it's a whole thing, but I want to fight my teammate. I think that's the kind of thing the UFC should be like, yes, oh my God, finally we can get rid of those AKA guys. They hate that whole thing. Because the UFC loves AKA. Burns win over number 3 Woodley and number 10 Maia. That's no joke. And he did bad things to them. Like, there's nothing to it. He should probably get the shot. I mean, there's rumblings about Masvidal versus Usman in July, but here's the way I see it now. Burns, he's on it. He's ready to fight. Usman maybe can fight this summer. We're still not sure yet. Burns, Usman, do that. Burns may not be the star Jorge Masvidal is, but you know what they do? They have him fight one of 2 people. The first one isn't really a sexy matchup, but they actually have an angle to sell it, is Jorge Masvidal, Leon Rocky Edwards, because they already fought once backstage. So they have that little selling point. Or if not, can you imagine? Jorge Masvidal is already a star. If he slapped around Conor McGregor, if he smeared around the cage, you think that wouldn't make him an ultra star? That would make him the hottest thing the UFC could have to offer if Masvidal lit up Conor McGregor. And then obviously the last 2 fighters that are in the top rankings that should fight, Tyron Woodley needs another fight against somebody who better than the guy that's trash talking him now, that trash talking him before, that's trash talking everybody that got kicked out of his gym, Colby Covington. They boom, 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 make those, get it on with, and let's do this thing.
Not a bad plan. Anyone want to go ahead and second those ideas from Jay?
Well, like, my idea was you do Usman and Masvidal. Go ahead and make that matchup, because that's a matchup where you can have, I think it was kind of mentioned, Usman's kind of viewed as like the boring champion sort of thing, the same thing that like Tyron Woodley was pegged as. So you put the guy with Masvidal, who's got all the hype in the world, the BMF thing, everything like that. If he goes in there and wins, it's superstardom, right? He's going to be that guy. And he was already reeling off of that from the BMF thing with The Rock and everything like that. He's shown up on ESPN doing all these shows. He has that potential to do that. So it's one of those matchups where, hey, we can take this guy in, not break the bank to have him take this fight, obviously, because that's a concern in every matchup. So I think that would be good in terms of what the UFC usually looks for in these title fights. Name power, who's going to buy that pay-per-view, who's going to buy that fight, that's going to sell itself. I don't know what the lead up would look like, considering we don't have press conferences and stuff like that anymore, but that's a damn good fight a lot of people would buy. And then for like Gilbert Burns, man, he looks super impressive. I don't know what you do with him yet. I don't think he's ready for that title shot, because Tyron Woodley is not the same Tyron Woodley right now. He hasn't looked the same in a long time. Outside of that Darren Till fight, Tyron Woodley, he's pretty much fought the exact same since the first Wonder Boy fight. It's just whether or not if he hits you with that right hand and then he follows up. But most of his fights, he's fighting off the back foot, trying to land that one shot. If he lands it, cool. If not, he's gonna just stay on the outside and circle away. So it's kind of frustrating. But credit to Burns for taking advantage of it. I'd like to see Burns against like a Covington, maybe a Leon Edwards, because they're not giving Leon Edwards a title shot.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I wanted to see Burns versus Leon Edwards, maybe, just because Leon Edwards gets perpetually screwed over, and he's not going to get the next shot. Give Usman, Masvidal, and just let's do away with this BMF thing. Conor, in my opinion, doesn't factor into the welterweight title picture, so don't think he really deserves a spot in this conversation. And Covington, I mean, I'd say Covington and Woodley just get that over with. They're both coming off of losses, so that makes sense. Ben, any other ideas you have for welterweight?
Nope. They already said it better than I could.
Cool. Well,
Wonder Boy Chiesa.
Yeah, why not? That's an interesting style matchup, so I'll take it. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the former welterweight champion Tyron Woodley. I mean, man, he definitely got decimated in every area of the fight against Gilbert Burns. So do we think this is the end for Tyron Woodley? 38 years old. He's been around the block now. Has had a long career as a wrestler before MMA. String of injuries as well. I mean, is this the end of the chosen one as we know him?
I guess I'll go ahead and piggyback off of my thoughts. I kind of jumped the gun on from the last question, but again, like I was saying a second ago, he's looked the same in the majority of his recent fights. He's trigger shy. He's looking to land that home run shot. If he hits it, he's going to follow it quickly and try to end the fight. If he doesn't, he's too content with just being on the outside of the cage and not pressing the action. That's why people labeled him as a boring fighter ever since he knocked out Robbie Lawler. I think the major concern from me, I think he's still got it athletically. I still think he can actually do it. But when he got on Instagram and said, I'm at he has a strange piece with losing to his second fight in a row, that doesn't bode well for motivating factors of wanting to get back on the horse and get that title back. I think he understands what he's up against at this point in his career. It could very well be the time for Tyron Woodley to hang it up.
All right. Any other thoughts on what Tyron Woodley might have left in the tank?
Yeah, I mean, it might be recency bias and overrating these losses to Usman and Burns, but they were so clear losses. I mean, jury's still out. Is Burns truly an elite welterweight? I think he proved it by beating Woodley, but I mean, the jury's still out. We'll see in the next couple fights. But I do think that Woodley's best days are behind him. I mean, I put together a stat that people have taken notice of. Woodley's entire UFC career, he's only hit 5 takedowns. He's a wrestling juggernaut. We know him from his Strikeforce time, that he was the grinder, and he'll take him down and lay and pray and blah, blah, blah. But he's only hit 5 takedowns in his whole UFC career, and 3 of those were to Carlos Condit, before he punted Carlos Condit's knee into the stands. So Woodley is a spectacular defensive wrestler with that power that Wells has mentioned multiple times. When his offense dwindles to zero and his defense ability starts to fade, then what does he have left to offer? So we know he's a great neutralizer, but I don't know. He just seems distracted. He seems disinterested. I mean, he's I think he's in and out of love with the MMA or something. I'm not really sure.
All right. Oh, that was pretty damn nice. Jay, so yeah, I think for me the most troubling sign was not his low output of volume. That's kind of something we've gotten used to, or his reliance on the right hand. For me, it was the clapping in between, pieced up. That really told a lot. I mean, it's like, to understand. And you're talking to someone who, in my sparring sessions, I've always had trouble just kind of taking things more seriously, I guess, or at least really going for moves and whatever. And I always kind of needed to get punched in the face one good time before I actually started letting loose, right? Well, to see that in a world champion was very, very disturbing. Like to see you're in a main event on a UFC card, you're in a main round, I mean a 5-round main event. You've got a world-class fighter in front of you who is lighting you up, and that isn't, the motivating factor for your mind to snap into fight mode. That's very disturbing to me. Even when he's had pedestrian performances in the past, Kamaru Usman, I mean, he definitely, being someone who was sitting, 15 feet away from the cage on that one, yeah, he didn't seem to be himself, but there wasn't that visible cue to, okay, now I'm fighting. Now let me do something.
Yeah.
We saw when Roy McDonald and Jake Shields defeated him, or Nate Marquardt, like, there was never that moment where he had to slap himself in the face and say, oh, you're in a fight now. The fight was there. He just couldn't perform in the fight. And that's one thing. That's one thing to be outclassed. It's one thing to have a better athlete dominate you or a skill set take over. But to have your mind so disconnected from the trained killer that's standing in front of you that you have to like clap and, make some sort of broad gestures to get into the action. That was the most disturbing part for me. I think it's safe to say that the Tyron Woodley that we know is no longer. Ben, any thoughts on Woodley and what he may have left?
Maybe it's just the COVID-19 empty arena thing. Maybe 15,000 people booing would have helped.
You know what? That's funny, but you might have a point.
I was being semi-serious. I'm always gonna be the last person to tell a professional fighter or professional anything else when they should retire, especially quote, for their own good. Unless they're just obviously like getting their brains destroyed, which he is not. But the one exception I would make is when all of their body language and their actual verbal language just sounds like somebody and looks like somebody who has one foot out the door. And that is what I see from Woodley right now. And obviously he's 38. He has multiple other kind of interests and potential revenue streams. He's 38 years old. While he appears to be in good health now, he's had a bunch of injuries. And I think I said this on this show last week. It's not like Shogun Hua where it's like, oh, it's his knee again. Like he's had what, a Muay Thai expert would say, all 8 points have been injured. It would be a hard road back to contention, assuming that's even possible. And if that amount of work doesn't interest him or he doesn't see it as a real possibility, knowing his own body, does he want to put in half the work to be just another guy and fight a couple more times? Because he's always seemed like kind of a very proud and confident person, just like confident in his own worth. I feel as though generally, like, just a lot of his own pride and self-worth have been on the line in all of his fights. Like, I can't picture him like taking a grudge match with someone like Covington, on the downslope of his own career. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up walking away. And, he will be one of the most interesting champions of this era to kind of assess a couple of years from now if that's what happens.
It's so incredible to me that like last year, maybe a little earlier before he fought Usman, that there was legitimate conversation on the UFC level, like announcers and analysts at the booth. I mean, of course, there's hyperbole to sell their fighter, that were wondering when Woodley would supplant GSP as the greatest welterweight. And right now, the conversation has shifted so dramatically to, oh yeah, Woodley, that might be a wrap on him, or we're getting there. I don't know. I disagree with Duffy. I think that we need to see a Woodley Covington double retirement match, and let's roll with it. Kind of like Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. Let's get it done. Let's get the hell out and have a good time.
Well, my only issue with that is that I don't think Covington and Woodley are at the same point in their careers. I mean, Rockhold and Weidman are. They're a little different in age, but in terms of just their bodies being dilapidated and their, commitment level being kind of around the same at this point in their careers, I don't think Woodley and Covington are there. I think Covington is entirely capable of getting at least one more title shot in the UFC. I could see him winning a title at some point. I don't think Woodley would want it with him right now.
I want to play devil's advocate to that point. If we're to get the old Tyron back, like we're talking about, right? That old Tyron that was on the cusp of being the greatest welterweight in the world. That it was the thing that he started saying. That was everybody was like, "Nah, bro, you're not close." So where right before the Usman fight, a lot of people were like, "Okay, maybe you are." If he is to get any sort of fire back, any whatsoever, even if it is just one more fight where he hangs it up Henry Cejudo style right at the end of it, as he's giving his post-fight interview, I think Colby Covington is that guy that will trigger that fire because of everything that's happened with him in the past. I don't see him having that sort of, I guess, motivation with anyone else in that division right now. I think anything else would just be like another fight just to go out there and get paid again, which is cool. I'm not per se like calling for his retirement. I'm just saying if he is to be the Tyron Woodley that was that championship level Tyron Woodley, what we're seeing from the mental side of him right now, it just says that ain't gonna happen by any means. So I mean, it's got to be something that truly motivates him, truly gets him in the gym to want to go in there and put in that extra work in that 2 a day or whatever have you in preparation for that during that fight camp. I think Colby Covington is the only guy that will do that for him.
That's a fair point. I mean, that grudge match has been simmering for a couple of years now. And, I think from a promotional angle, oh, excuse me. Oh, wow. What an inappropriate time to hold in the sneeze. Especially my son is like freaking out in the background. So I mean, hey, LA is on curfew right now. So like if I step outside of my house, like National Guard might shoot me with pepper spray or something. So but anyway, especially the personal nature that the feud between Colby and Tyron took. You now look at two former ATT residents. There's so much to that. There's so much to that feud that maybe if there's something left there for Tyron, that would be the one thing to spark it up. But when you talk about a pure style matchup, that is a nightmare for Tyron Woodley. That is an absolute nightmare. For someone who is relied on that one big power hand and being the superior athlete as you age, and not to make light of his actual technical improvements over the years. I think from a defensive standpoint, Woodley is fantastic. Like his boxing defense is absolutely phenomenal. But of course, like he has not been the top flight fighter in his last two outings. So if there's anything left in the chosen one, Colby will bring it out. If not, then I will cry. Let's put it that way.
Dude, it's a very fair point because Colby Covington right now would get in there and box his ass up. Legitimately, like the volume and pressure that we've seen Colby Covington put on display in his last few fights, that would overwhelm that Tyron Woodley that we saw this past weekend. And it wouldn't even be close.
I would even say the Woodley, I mean the Colby Covington that we saw lose to Kamaru Usman, that Colby Covington, or the one who defeated Robbie Lawler, that Colby Covington gives everything prime Tyron could handle. Everything. Like, so personal reasons, I don't want to see that fight, but that might be the one fight to let us know whether or not Woodley still got it. So let's go ahead and move along here. We'll jump to the swing or miss portion of the broadcast now. Peter Yan, and Jose Aldo will be fighting for the now vacant bantamweight title, as it looks like Henry Cejudo's retirement is real. We still don't believe it. So, gentlemen, is Aldo the right guy to put up against Jan right now? Jay, I can see the emotion in your face. You're gonna miss on this one. Is Aldo the right guy?
I'm gonna miss on this one just a little bit. I mean, it's not like there are other bantamweights that are healthy and fighting and active right now. I mean, we have 4 bantamweights this weekend that are fighting. 3 of them are ranked above Jose Aldo. So why do we have to make this now? Was it that the UFC didn't hear enough rage that Henry Cejudo was going to fight Jose Aldo? And they said, well, if the fans didn't burn the house down, I guess we'll be okay, and we can put Aldo in another title fight. Marlon Moraes was scheduled to fight Peter Yan in Kazakhstan. That was the headliner. That was in June, I think it was June 13th. So that was going to happen. And it didn't, because obviously they're not in Nur Sultan anymore. But the fight didn't happen, and it kind of fizzled. But I don't know why, and we don't know why. Because if it were a visa issue, Jose Aldo pulled out of his fight because of a visa issue. It's not the fight. It's not a fight. It doesn't make sense in any degree. And I hate it. I don't like it. It's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad. Get rid of it. Get rid of it.
Is there anybody here that thinks this is the right fight to make? Aldo fighting for the vacant belt.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, by the time people are watching this, it will be at least June 2nd. But on the evening that we're recording, June 1st, 2020, it is exactly 12 years from Jose Aldo's debut on U.S. soil. You know, he was a 10-1 prospect from Brazil. He fought at WEC 34. And he was actually taking on Alexandre Pequeno Nogueira, who, I mean, at the time was probably the greatest featherweight of all time up to that point. And Aldo was a 2-1 underdog. You know, they were clearly bringing in Nogueira, who had most recently been Shudo lightweight champ, to set him up in a fight with Uriah Faber. And Aldo destroyed him that night. Just boxed him up for the first round. Then the second round, Nogueira kind of pseudo pulled guard, went to his back. Aldo didn't go in. He just busted him up with 2 huge standing to ground punches, then dove in and just elbowed the shit out of him. Now, I say all that for really no reason at all. It's just a piece of trivia. This is a terrible matchup.
Straight that Aldo's been a elite. Yeah, it just sucks.
I think the matchup.
He's 0-1 at bantamweight. Of course, it's not the right matchup to make.
Yeah, it's like the matchup itself, like in a vacuum, Aldo versus Peter Yan sounds like a great fight. The way Aldo performed in his losing effort to Marlon Moraes, but it's a losing effort to Marlon Moraes, who was supposed to fight Peter Yan, the former champion Marlon Moraes, in that division, who has a plethora of wins at bantamweight. They pulled him away from a fight to boost up the guy who he beat for the title, the vacant title.
You can't even make it make bad sense.
You know, but here, the funny thing about it is, at first when we talked about this, and I know we were all against the idea of Aldo fighting for the bantamweight title, but we weren't ready to burn the house down. It's like, all right, this doesn't make sense, but Aldo is a name, so all right, he performed good, so all right, we'll see what happens. And then when it became Dominic Cruz, who also was coming off of a loss, it was like, well, pandemic, it's like 3 people available, so okay, Dominic Cruz is the best name out of the bunch. All right, throw him in there. Okay, but they're actually acting like Jose Aldo earned a title shot. That's the part that I find really funny. Leon Edwards right now is sitting somewhere in London, probably just crushing soda cans in his hand right now out of pure fury off of his 7 or 8 fight win streak. And yeah, and a man who is 0-1 at bantamweight, is fighting for the vacant bantamweight title over the former bantamweight champion that won on this latter half of 0-1 comes from? Make it make sense, fam.
I can't make it make sense because none of this shit makes any sense. Not only does this matchup make zero sense because you have 3 in Petr Yan taking on number 6 and Jose Aldo. Meanwhile, this very weekend, you have number 2 versus number 4. And let me further make sense of this or not make sense of this. They're the 3rd fight on the card. Above them is ranked number 5 and number 9. What the fuck is happening? Nothing makes sense. Nothing.
It's so stupid. It's so stupid.
You know, I would almost be okay with this if this were like if they announced some sort of Grand Prix style format and these are how the brackets were laid out. Like, okay, but
listen, the people's title fight is Aljamain Sterling and Corey Sandhagen, and they're not even the co-main event this weekend. It just doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever.
So build above them. I can't figure it out. Other than Garbrandt was the champion at one point and then not anymore. I can't.
What a 3-fight losing streak? A
yeah.
3-fight
Dillashaw Munoz, where he got smoked
round knockout losing streak.
I don't know.
Last just little thing for me on this. We're not talking about Conor McGregor or Jorge Masvidal here. Like the knock on Jose Aldo, even when he was one of the 3 best fighters on the entire planet, was that the UFC couldn't sell him. He's not a draw. There's not some weird ulterior motive where you can go like, okay, I can see why the UFC is fast tracking this dude because it'll sell a bunch of pay-per-views. It's not going to draw flies. You know, like.
Yeah, and here's another thing to consider as well too. Now, if the concern is being a draw, because obviously, while Aldo wasn't a huge draw as a champion, he is a much bigger name than Aljamain Sterling, than Corey Sandhagen, than Hassan Sal, or even Cody Garbrandt.
Mm.
So if the concern is pay-per-view sales, and we just got off of a pay-per-view headline by Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, who are not draws on their own rights, but we're in this weird phase in the world where there's pretty much no sports going on, and perhaps that is what boosted up the sales. Maybe now's the time to put on those legitimate fights.
Oh my God, what a novel idea.
You know, if you're able to sell as much as I think the reported buy rate, no way to really confirm this with the current system, but I think it was 700,000 was the number I saw reported.
Yep.
So, do you think in a normal conditions, Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje sells that much?
Maybe half that much.
Yeah, I mean we've seen Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee sold what, like 250,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
So those are the numbers we're looking at. I'm sorry. Maybe you should put on the legitimate fights now, especially with the sports world watching, with a casual sports fan watching. Maybe put on the best product and not necessarily the highest name. And even if you are the casual sports fan, do you know who Aldo is? Probably not. So what do I know? I'm just a guy here with all this pro-black comic book stuff on. All right, so let's go ahead and start the clock because the speed bag is upon us, and that is my time to flex my authority on you mofos. So I'm going to start with our special guest, Mr. Wells here. You are going to have 10 seconds to answer the following question. Colby Covington is no longer a member of AT&T. Do you think he was asked to leave like Jorge Masvidal claimed?
Absolutely. But we'll never hear that from anybody.
All right.
Final answer.
All right, Duffy.
ATT is a huge camp. They've been successful before in keeping people separated who did not like each other. So, yeah, I think something official must have happened here, and I don't think we'll hear about it.
Jake.
I mean, the guy talked his way out of a top-tier camp by being a tool. This is a prime example of a gimmick way too far.
All right, Ben, I'm going to start with you on this question. Anderson Silva challenged Conor McGregor to fight at 80 kilograms, which is roughly 176 pounds. I think exactly 176.37.
Yes.
Very strange number there. Do you believe that fight can happen?
Yes, actually. I wouldn't take it over the field, but I think it might be the likeliest next fight for Conor McGregor, which is terrible.
Jay?
I'm hearing now that Conor McGregor is getting up to weight by eating bees. I don't know if there's any truth to that.
Hey, Matt.
Sure. Why the hell not? I mean, what is Anderson Silva going to do at this point in his career?
All right.
Take him in the face.
So enthusiastic for this potential matchup. So now, Jay, I'm going to start with you on this one. If Felicia Spencer wins this weekend against Amanda Nunes at UFC 250 in the main event, would it be an all-time great upset? You have 10 seconds.
Man, the way Nunes is growing as a favorite day after day, it might approach GSP Sarah territory, but it'd be legendary no matter what.
All right. Matt?
Absolutely. It's be the biggest upset since Holly Holm kicked Rousey's head all the way back to U.S.
All right. And Ben?
Yeah, I mean, just strictly in terms of the numbers, obviously it would be right up there. And depending on how she did it, maybe just in terms of our perception and how we think of it afterwards.
All right. All right. Good answers, gentlemen. So now we are going to switch the clock over. And this is my time to shine. So I'm giving myself 30 seconds to answer all three questions. The clock will start after I read the first question. Colby Covington is no longer a member of American Top Team. Do you think he was asked to leave like Jorge Masvidal claimed? I think he just shops at the same Whole Foods as Ben Askren, and he's scared. He don't want to smoke. Now, as far as Anderson Silva being challenged by Conor McGregor at 80 kilos, yeah, the fight can happen. Anything can happen at this point, but is perhaps the stupidest idea I've heard for fighters of their caliber. Even a depleted version of Anderson Silva deserves better than this. So if Felicia Spencer wins this weekend, would it be an all-time great upset? Yes, for a variety of reasons, but mostly technically. There we go. So there is the feedback. So we're going to wrap things up right here with just a brief talk about UFC 250. That is the next pay-per-view headlined by one of the feedback topics, Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer for the women's featherweight title. So this is the first defense for Amanda Nunes as a featherweight champion after dethroning Chris Cyborg. So is this the final fight for the women's featherweight belt? And yeah, so let's go ahead. I'll ask that question first. Ben, is this the final women's featherweight title fight?
I think the title and the division might stick around a little while after this. I mean, it's not as though they're having to sink a whole lot of effort into it, especially because its champion has two titles. So they can just kind of give her a fight at featherweight when something crops up. So,
yeah, I think this is going to be the last hurrah for the featherweight title. I mean, Nunes is talking about retiring.
Yeah.
So Nina Ansaros is pregnant now, right?
Yeah. Nunes doesn't got to carry that baby. Like, keep fighting.
Yeah, but she's going to want to spend time with the baby. So, you know, he's trying to be all responsible parent and spend time with your kids and all that. So yeah, I don't think that we're going to see this. And then on top of that, like, how many other featherweights are they? Are they like, are we going to make Aspen Ladd eat more or something? And that's going to be it? Or, you know, it doesn't really seem to be any sort of actual featherweight division. So I think the UFC is just going to cut their losses when Amanda Nunes hangs it up. And this probably will be her final hurrah as a featherweight champion. Anybody want to jump out there and disagree with me?
I think they have one more. I think there's one more featherweight title fight. Assume Nunes does what everybody thinks she's going to do. There's one more fight. And the reason why there's one more fight is because we on this panel have actually discussed this topic. Who is going to get the next title shot? Because Felicia Spencer fought Zara Ferrer dos Santos, and Megan Anderson fought Norma Dumont. And we had the question, are they going to do that who won better thing? Because they both won by first round stoppage. Megan Anderson's going to get the next title shot, and that will be the end of the division. She's on a 2 two fight win streak because she finished Zara Fandor Sanders with the triangle and then finished Norma Dumont. I thought it was with strikes. So she's on a 2-fight win streak.
I mean, strikes were happening at the time of the stoppage. That's about all I can say about it.
And the fight ended. So there it is. So Megan Anderson is, I think they're going to do that. And we're going to go, all right, now what?
I
I
want to wrap this topic up.
Yeah, man. I think I think I would not be surprised to see Amanda Nunes pull a Henry Cejudo after she gets her hand raised. I really would not. And then that would just complete the whole cycle of title fuckery in the UFC right now.
Seriously, if she wins this weekend and retires, we'd have how many champions left?
Well, listen, here's that tweet from Ben Askren that he put out there that, kind of blew up. UFC 125 is vacant. Vacant 135. Vacant 145. 155. 185. 145, 155.
But Volkanovski.
Yeah, Volkanovski. I think he meant to tie that into the next part where he said they can't leave the country with 185. So, with him and Adesanya can't leave the country. Vacant heavyweight, essentially. light heavyweight vacant. Heavyweight, who knows? I mean, it's just imagine if Amanda Nunes walks away. Like, what are titles anymore?
And she's been saying this for a while that this is a distinct possibility. So gentlemen, let's go ahead and wrap things up. So give me one fight, especially Jay. I know you didn't study every fight on this card, so give me just one of them.
All right,
that you as potential for the night here.
Just one, and I can tie it into my own personal jump the script. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment, because the UFC is burying a top-ranked flyweight match on the early prelims of the card. Jussier Formigas fighting Alex Perez, number 4, number 9 on the Fight Pass effective Fight Pass prelims. That's a fight of the night pick, and here we are again with a division they're trying. They can't sell. Well, I can't sell because you're not marketing them. And there we go again. They're buried. There are 4 fights above them on the card where both fighters are unranked. So that's my fight of the night. And what?
Man. All right, Matt, what is your sleeper for fight of the night here?
My sleeper for fight of the night is another fight that's buried way down on the card, and it should be much higher up on the card, and that is Aljamain Sterling versus Corey Sandhagen. The fact that that's not the co-main event is as egregious as putting them in the first fight of the night. You might as well.
All right, and Ben, what about you?
I don't know if it's a sleeper for fight of the night, but it is a fight that will end with somebody asleep, and that is Alonzo Menifield versus Devin Clark. Menifield, I mean, any brutal knockout artist comes up, through the Contender Series or whatever at light heavyweight or heavyweight, you always kind of wait for the other shoe to drop. But thus far, the only thing that has dropped has been his opponents. Vinny Mahmoud was so as competition, as far as like being UFC level, but Paul Craig's whole thing is letting you kick his ass for a while and then like throw in the Hail Mary. He did not get to throw any Hail Marys. Some people needed to say some Hail Marys over him. So I'm very interested to see this fight, and it will probably be a short one.
Shout out to Fortis MMA.
I'll go ahead and highlight Sean O'Malley versus Eddie Wineland simply because I think it might be too soon for young O'Malley. So very interesting how that is going to play out. So in my haste to get through this outline here, I neglected the best title segment in all of media history. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon. So I'll just go ahead, drop my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment, and then I will turn it over to you, gentlemen. So my I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcon's moment comes from one Mr. Jason Whitlock, who today has been announced he is no longer a part of Fox Sports. Now, can't say I'm surprised about this, simply for this reason. If you are, and granted, with all due respect to him on this particular subject matter, because he has been vocal in support of this subject matter to an extent. If you, as a black man, are taking that token approach, and you habitually go against the needs what's necessary to uplift your people and to speak on the issues that matter most to the folks that look like you. Forgetting what you look like, you're just expendable. You went the way of Stacey Dash. You went the way of Diamond and Silk. I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons. Gentlemen, take it away.
I guess to kind of have a real segment, the real segment I am very surprised about. We knew that the UFC was ending its Reebok deal because it was a 6-year contract for $70 million. But we did not know that they're not going to get back together at the end of this arrangement. This is by all accounts the end of the UFC Reebok era. So and this is my favorite part, there are so many questions. There are so many questions that I'm not going to ask on the show because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be another company to fill the void. Will their sponsors come back? We have no idea. And that is fun to me. Also, my buddy, my pal, Mike Bone of MMA Junkie has been keeping track of Reebok compliance pay. And you guys remember that Dana White very famously said, all the money's going to the fighters. 6 months left of the 6-year deal, and the UFC has paid less than half of the money to the fighters. 33 of $70 million has gone to the fighters. So even if the next 6 months have $2 million of Reebok pay, that is exactly half the pay. So Reebok deal, I won't mince words, was an unmitigated disaster for the sport as a whole. So I'm really curious to see what the market's going to look like next year. I am not surprised, Mr. Falcons, that they're not getting back together.
Shout out to Gilbert Melendez. All right, so Ben, what is your not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment?
I got nothing. I mean, after what you offered up there, what am I going to talk about? Like Spike Carlisle walking away and getting punched in the side of the head? No, I'm out.
Which I'm glad you mentioned because that was funny as hell. Matt, what is your I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment this week?
I mean, I don't really necessarily have a surprise, but I guess I kind of had an epiphany, like while watching the fights and trying to keep up with everything. I don't want crowds to come back during fights. I am content with having a closed arena, let these fighters go at it, and not have to worry about the influence from the crowd. I'm fine with it, at least for the lower to mid-tier cards. If you have a big title fight, yeah, let's do it in front of a crowd. But for everything else, let's have it, be like NXT in a way or something like that. WWE, everything's pro wrestling. Let's bring it back to that. Have all the up and coming talent fight in the apex until they're pay-per-view worthy. Then let's do a pay-per-view in front of a crowd. I am so glad I did not have to endure boos and the fireflies and the wave and everything like that during that fight that Tyron Woodley put on in that main event on Saturday.
Very, very good point. I like to hear the sounds of the impact of the strikes, and the judges still suck regardless, so it kind of doesn't matter on that end. Now, gentlemen, that is going to call it a close for this edition of Unleashed. Thank you, Mr. Wells, for jumping on once again. I'm sure you will be back as soon as schedule permits. So, of course, our Twitter handles are somewhere on the screen through the magic of post-production, so just go ahead and look somewhere aside from where we are. You'll see our names. So you can follow Matt Wells' work at Flow Combat at Fansided MMA. You can follow the work of one Jay Petrie and one Benjamin Duffy on Sherdog.com. And myself, you can see my work on The Body Lock and MMA on Point. Oh, yeah, my MMA news as well. So go ahead, subscribe, like, share, tell a friend to tell a friend, tell that friend to tell 10 more friends. And you know what you got to do. Stay beautiful, stay positive, stay woke. You got to stay sexy. I'll see you when I see you. Peace.